Hello friends, enemies, and those still under review! Welcome to L Chats, where I chat about things that I'm a fan of. Today I'm going to talk about my marathon experience. I touched briefly on this topic in my first video about resolutions. Grab a drink, a snack, or a craft because it's about to get long. I honestly have had a lot of thoughts about my experience running a marathon. I am a fan of it. I give the experience a solid 7 out of 10 rating, including the training block, marathon, and aftermath. Running a marathon is not for the faint of heart. Even with the increase in popularity of running as a sport in recent years, roughly 1% or less of people run the marathon, according to Run Repeat. They conducted an analysis of 107.9 million race results from over 70,000 events between 1986 to 2018. A link to an article about this study is in the box. Judging from common reactions from coworkers ranging from why to I could never or I'm not running ever, it's definitely a divisive distance. Running in general can be a bit divisive. Either one tolerates or likes it or one hates it. I've met very few people in between. I'm someone who liked to run, joined the army, hated running, and now I've come back to liking it to reclaim something for me from the army's grasp. I'm going to preface this video with I'm not an expert in any of this, nor should you look to me for medical or training advice. Without further ado, let's get into the good and bad of the training block. First, before you ask, no, I did not lose any toenails. In fact, I only had one blister from worn out shoes throughout the entire training cycle. That was very good, and I'm not sure what I did to get such good fortune other than I already knew what kind of shoes worked for me as well as what socks to pair them with. Second, another good. I used the Hal Higdon Novice 1 marathon plan, which is good because I had no idea where to even start with how many miles I should be running or how long my long runs should be. It is kind of a longer plan at 18 weeks from the start to the marathon. I know there are 12-week plans out there, but it felt like an easy bridge and build up from the miles I had already been doing to that point. I would definitely follow another Hal Higdon plan. I've included a link to the plan in the box. It used a 2-week build, 1-week step back cycle through the first 12 weeks, and then it was 1 week step up, 1 week step down, 1 week up until I tapered. For those of you not in the know, Hal Higdon is a famous author, runner, and running coach. He's published more than 3 dozen books, including Marathon, The Ultimate Training Guide, according to the About section on his website, link in the box. Third, figuring out fueling was also a plus. It meant that I tried several different types of fuel throughout the training cycle. That was mostly fun. I used Nerds gummy clusters, applesauce, and a brand of gels called E-Gel. Link in the box. I tried goo, but I didn't really like the texture and it sometimes sat rather heavy in my stomach. E-Gel did not sit heavy in my stomach. It had nearly 40 carbs in it. It also had potassium and sodium in it. Potassium for the sore muscles and sodium for the hydration. The general rule of thumb for fueling while running long distances is 60 to 90 carbs per hour. I did a bit more research about how much sodium I actually needed and felt that Nerds gummy clusters were actually a bit on the low side. So I had to supplement those with a brand called Salt Stick. That was interesting to have the overly sugary taste of gummy clusters paired with a suddenly different flavor, but it still wasn't necessarily bad. I just needed to do better at taste matching. I also used fuel as motivation on particularly long runs, telling myself to keep going until the next snack break. I also always packed extra just in case my time estimate was wrong. Fourth, I had a great support system. My husband would meet me after long runs if he was home, and he would prepare food while I tried to get my brain to start working again. I also would nap after particularly long runs. He'd refill my water bottle whenever I asked and bring me snacks for these long distances. This would have been much more difficult without his continuous support. Fifth, I genuinely enjoyed getting outside and seeing things around my town. My husband and I had recently moved to the area, so we hadn't gone out much. Now I'm much more familiar with the local area. I have a couple of coffee shops and brunch places I ran by for months that I need to go to. I also enjoyed seeing so many other runners out and about on the streets both during the week and through the weekend. The first bad I could think of is the sheer amount of time I had to pour into this. It could still be done if one has a great support network, which I did, but it was like having a part-time job on top of my regular job that didn't pay me. There was a lot of thinking power donated to that task as well. My life didn't stop just because I was training. All of my other hobbies fell by the wayside because I was either running or tired from running. I did manage to bake a few things, but I had to plan carefully around my training schedule. Second, the exhaustion. I was sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, every night, and sometimes more on the weekend. I just had this base level of exhaustion that I couldn't really combat in the later weeks of the training block. Compounding this is that I sometimes had to get up very early to accommodate other plans, so I could still feel well prepared for race day. I don't normally drink energy drinks, but early morning runs and then sitting at my desk at work trying desperately to get my brain to function sometimes drove me to it. I remember the later weeks of the training cycle where I'd just be complaining to all my friends that I was tired. Third, something happened unrelated to training in that I got an appendectomy around week 4. I had to take 2 weeks off of running. Then I had to figure out how to ease back into it, but also try to build on my progress. I ended up running much less than what the schedule called for. That first run back was brutal. It was easily the second worst run of my whole training block. The worst run crown goes to the 15-mile run. My headphones died at mile 7. I started getting the low battery notification around mile 5, and I started running faster, thinking I could outrun the battery. Alas, I could not, and had to run 8 miles just listening to the water slosh in my running vest, my shoes hitting the ground, and my own breathing for 8 miles. This was the worst run. The third worst run was probably the 18-mile run. I almost rage quit at mile 8. My gloves were too large and kept pushing buttons on my running watch. My phone wouldn't go back into my running belt with my fuel, and my running belt kept riding up. There was just too much going on. I forced myself to keep running instead, and I did complete that run by reminding myself that at least I had music, unlike that other run. That's really it for the bad things for the training block. Most of the other things were simple annoyances, like I had to do a lot more laundry. Some runs were cold and many were hot. Some reflections from this period include that it might not be that one is slow, but that it's hot out. Running can turn into a bit of a slog sometimes with just the sheer number of miles. I have a distinct memory of turning to a coworker, relaying the number of miles I had to run that day and telling them, I'm tired of running. I didn't really feel super hungry until it came to the weeks I was running at least 30 miles a week. Of course, experiences may vary with all of this. I don't know if I'd have the motivation to train for a spring marathon. The thought of all that winter running gives me the chills. Now for the marathon itself. The morning of, I wasn't really anxious or nervous as I thought I would be. I thought I would be so much more nervous, but instead I felt ready. I reminded myself that this was something I'd trained for. We stayed in a hotel because neither of us wanted to drive a couple hours for a 7:30 a.m. start. My husband's race started later than mine, so he took a video of me at the starting line. I think there was a bit of an anxious rush as the crowd moved forward with each wave starting off. The good part of running the marathon is probably going to be kind of unstructured. It's still kind of disjointed in my head as to how I felt. The crowd turnout and signs were great. The crowd had a lot of energy and funny signs. I ran this in about mid-November, so I saw at least 2 signs saying that we were running better than the government. There were some punny signs like keep chasing your dreams. Another set of signs I saw before the halfway mark were paired groups of signs. One would hold a sign saying you're almost there. The second person would hold a sign with an arrow pointing at the first person saying bad at math. Someone also figured out the 69% mark and held up a sign to mark it. There were 2 signs I did not like. My least favorite sign was the one that advertised bacon. When I came to the station, there was no bacon. Before that sign, someone hung up a "You're 90% of the way to halfway" sign. In conjunction with that sign was a very long uphill battle on mile 12. So needless to say, I was not very happy about it. Some people were offering coffee after mile 20, and I was dubious of it, having been warned of race day GI issues. Another example of such a lovely crowd is that I had to throw away my empty Powerade bottle. I missed the garbage can, and I remember saying, "Oh no," as it bounced. An older woman who was spectating immediately shouted, "I'll get it." She dashed off to retrieve my empty Powerade bottle and threw it away for me. I remember interacting with someone who's holding up a sign saying, "I bet the marathon seemed like a good idea 4 months ago." I told her that, yeah, it did. And then she was like, "I bet you paid for this too." And I was like, I did pay for this. I saw so many power-up signs, as well as "Where are we running to?" and "Worst parade ever" signs. The last good energy I saw were the people who were wearing inflatable dinosaur costumes. That boosted my morale for sure. Another good is that my fueling strategy was locked in, and I enjoyed that part of the race too. I genuinely didn't have any race day issues with opening or consuming my fuel. The main problem I ran into is that I needed to wear a jacket the whole time because I needed the pockets to carry all my snacks. My running belt didn't really work for me. Another good is that I was genuinely smiling and enjoying myself for the first 10 miles or so. The first half of the course was mostly downhill with some downhills later. I also tried to smile every time I saw a race photographer. But smiling for the photographers helped trick my brain into thinking I was enjoying the whole experience. The finish was also downhill, a major plus. The final good is that the marathon had the option for people to sign up for coaches. They would run the marathon and then run back onto the course to find those who had fallen behind the pace. These people were so encouraging, even though they ran so much further than the 26.2 miles. My favorite was the coach who told me that there were 3 turns left, and there were only 3 more turns. The next one is kind of a neutral. There were a surprising amount of people handing out alcohol. I chugged champagne at mile 5.5. I scooped up a Fireball single serving bottle somewhere after mile 20, and I saw many light beers offered both before and after the 10-mile mark. I was trying to run all the way through, and light beer runs right through me, pardon the pun. I also felt that it would probably dehydrate me faster, and while I was running for vibes, I wanted to avoid the porta potties. As a result, I cannot give a review of the porta potties. The bad times in the marathon were hard. At mile 16, my left Achilles tendon told me it was in stabbing pain, so I slowed down and walked some. It probably took me a minute or so to recover, limping along before I could get back into pace. I also had a stabbing pain in my hip flexor as I could see the finish line. I wanted to keep sprinting because I was so close, but I slowed down. It eventually just kind of went away. It was probably around 10 to 20 seconds of pain, and I finished the race, so the pain wasn't good. While I didn't lose toenails, I did chafe. My shorts were slightly too large and kept slipping down on the back, rubbing against my underwear and the elastic band on my jacket. I had diligently put Vaseline everywhere I could find seams that morning, so the only chafing was on the small of my back where everything overlapped. I hadn't had a big problem with the shorts falling down in training, so I didn't put any Vaseline there, much to my personal detriment. I found out in the post-race shower that I had chafed. Next, I have a couple of pet peeves. A bit of a pet peeve was that some runners who would get water from the water stations would stop immediately upon receiving the water, making it hard to maintain my pace. It was just kind of a lack of awareness of other people on the course. I mean, I definitely fell into that myself at times, but I tried to be cognizant of my fellow runners and move out of their way as I was able to. Another small pet peeve is that at mile 20, I was told that I was running the last hill. I counted 4 more inclines after that so-called last hill. I appreciate that they were not very significant inclines, but having run over 20 miles beforehand, all I could think was that lady lied to me. That's really it. I still have a few more stories about things I saw, like the guy who wore running shorts that were convincingly printed like cut-off jean shorts, but that's really the good and bad of the experience. Now for the aftermath. The marathon was a lot. I had known that I would be exhausted. I knew that the marathon blues were a thing. It's one thing to know and yet another to actually experience it. So let's talk about the good parts of recovery first. The first good I can think of is that my legs were very warm for my small dog. She loves to sleep in my lap, so it was a bonus for her. Another good was that I was not as crippled as I thought I would be. And by the next day, I was already entertaining the idea of running another marathon. That's really where it ends though. The bad was that I could barely walk. I finished the marathon and could stagger along at first. The next day I was hurting. I was so sore that I could not walk at my regular speed. It took a couple of days to get back to normal speed for me. I had to use my arms to lift myself out of and into whatever chair I was sitting in because my legs did not want to move. It also agitated the blister I got on my training block. I also developed some sort of bump on the top of my foot that I'm going to get checked out at the end of the month. Oh, and the marathon blues. The crash from running a marathon is hard. I was convinced, while everyone looks kind of bad in race photos, that my legs look like tree trunks. I'll throw in my favorite photo from my marathon photos of me crossing the finish line. I do not look happy. I envy the person behind me who's smiling wildly, but my legs actually don't look that large. They look strong. They look like they just ran a marathon. It also meant that I was emotionally volatile for a couple of days, and it took me a few days to kind of get to this even keel emotionally. I also didn't like that it took me a while to go to sleep that night. And now, the last question I'm sure you're all asking. But why? Why would you do this, Elle? A part of me wants to jokingly respond, but why not? Why not train and run a marathon? The real story I hinted at earlier is that I wanted to get back into enjoying running. So, was I a big runner in high school? No. I did do track for 3 seasons, sure, but I did short distances and long jump. I didn't want to run long distance at all. I ran the 3,000 meter once because I felt like I needed to make up skipping a meet to my track coach. I swore I'd never do it again. Now I regularly run further than that just because I want to. I suppose some of it is fueled from a depressive episode I went through in a toxic situation. I came out the other side and I've wanted to just live life as much as I can since. To me, living life means doing something that scares me, and the marathon, quite frankly, scared me. It no longer does. In fact, distance running has become something I really enjoy and something that I'm a fan of. In conclusion, I would absolutely do this again. Probably not this year, maybe late next year or in 2028, because it really did take a lot of energy out of me. Finally, I think that the marathon is also probably one of the last fields where both amateur and professionals can compete together. I think that's really beautiful, and I want to keep running them. Thank you for listening to me chat about this. I'm certain that my husband, parents, and co-workers are tired of hearing about this from me. I turn this all to you now, friends, enemies, and those under review. Have you done something that scared you, but you now enjoy it? Would you ever run a marathon, or are you on team never? Please like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, being a fan is fun. Have a great day.